Here's a fact about Cunk on Earth. Cunk on Earth is a documentary miniseries produced in collaboration between the BBC and Netflix. It is a follow-up to Cunk on Britain and got a sequel, Cunk on Life. Wait, do documentaries get sequels? Point is, it seems like a pretty competent series about the history of the Earth, hosted by one Philomena Cunk. At least that's what I thought until I actually sat down with my dearly beloved George and watched it. What I found is a series that is actively lying to its viewers about the origins of our history. And today, for the season finale of Facts About Season 3, we're going to be discussing and disproving these lies. We'll talk about the lies of each episode in order, though I should say this before we get started, I'm not the biggest history buff, so I probably didn't catch every lie, and to be safe, I'm only talking about things that I know without a shadow of a doubt are wrong. But as you can see from the length of this video, I think I've caught enough to show the lies of this documentary series. Let's Cunk this Earth. We start this series at the start of the Earth. Well, more specifically, the start of the only thing on Earth that can watch and process this documentary, humanity. We catch our first falsehood when Cunk talks about this cave painting, which she just ignorantly calls a hand, which, yes, was most likely the method used to create this piece. However, anyone with the tiniest amount of media literacy can tell that this is actually supposed to be a turkey. She then compares this painting of cows to the ambitiousness and hype of Fast and Furious 7, which, first off, is actually just called Furious 7. Second off, Furious 7 fucking sucks. I haven't seen it, but as we all know, if you're a fourth or higher installment in a film franchise, you're most likely going to suck. A more apt comparison would be something like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which is a great film. Next, Cunk talks about farming, civilization, and all of the inventions that came along with them. I did not catch anything here, but I bring it up because she uses Minecraft to simulate what the first cities may have looked like, which is an actually decent build, except look here at the hotbar. Notice how there isn't a health or hunger bar? Which means she's in creative mode, but yet some of her tools are damaged? Why would that be? I have a theory of what happened here, but Cunk heads, which is what I'm going to be calling fans of Cunk, will not like it. My theory is that Cunk wanted to trick us into thinking she built this structure in survival mode. What she did was load up a normal world with cheats, turned on creative, built the structure, got some decent tools, switched to survival, used them up a bit, and then recorded this footage, so that she could impress people with her Minecraft skills, but for some reason, Cunk accidentally switched creative mode back on while recording, making this whole plan a bust. Even if she pulled this off successfully, there are still some glaring giveaways, such as the fact that she only has one cobblestone, one sandstone, and coincidentally, one red sandstone. Next up, she calls this thing a circle, which is just blatantly wrong. That is clearly, without a doubt, a cylinder. Learn the difference between 2D and 3D shapes, damn it. Then she woman-splains how the cylinder works like the viewer is a child, which makes no sense because this is a TVMA rated program. Next, she explains to this expert that the highest number is actually 700, citing a YouTube video that I tried to look for but unfortunately came up empty-handed. For some reason, she never shows us what this video is, but now I know what Graham's number is. Then she talks about money, then reads off a random tweet about how capitalism is going to destroy us all to an expert. Then she talks about writing. When talking to an expert about it, he asks Cunk if she judges books by their cover. She says yes, so the expert epically pwns her by destroying her by saying, well, that's a sad and misguided view. Then she starts talking about ancient Egypt, specifically the pyramids. She claims that we don't know the shape of the pyramids, another instance of Cunk not knowing what 3D shapes are. That's clearly the Toblerone shape. Ding dong. Then she talks about mummies of Scooby-Doo fame, which is something only someone who talks about cartoons would say. If only there was a franchise that was specifically about mummies, one that has had multiple films since 1932, perhaps one that was literally just called The Mummy. If only. Next, the Greeks and their philosophers, such as Plato, Aristotle, and Pythagoras. Wait, hold on. That guy's not a philosopher. That's a mathematician. Ever hear of the Pythagorean theorem? Next up is Belgian techno anthem Pump Up the Jam, which starts playing for a decent amount of time for some reason. I can't show it because it's copyrighted, but trust me, it's there. However, we come back to Cunk talking about Pompeii, specifically the creature comforts such as indoor plumbing and colilingus. I have no idea what that is, and I don't think I spelled it right when I put it into Google, but it sounds like a disease. Next, Cunk plays a game with an expert where she lists off things and the expert has to say whether or not the Romans invented or perfected it. Everything is going well until they get to anal bleaching, and it makes the expert clearly uncomfortable. Poor guy. The episode ends with Cunk teasing the next episode, which will be about religion and its spread, which is compared to memes, but without the clothing style, which, come on, need I say more? Let's hop into the next episode. This episode starts with Cunk talking about Jesus Christ, comparing his realness to Garfield and Justin Timberlake. Now, while Garfield is confirmed to be real and is most likely a form of God himself, Justin Timberlake is not. And then we get another mention of Pump Up the Jam. Then we talk about the fall of Rome. And then the Dark Ages, which she pronounces Dark Edges, though to be fair, I think that is her accent to blame. During an interview, the expert says that the proper term for the Dark Ages was the Early Middle Ages, citing the negative connotations that come from an era of fantastic thinkers, artists, and authors. After the interview, Cunk goes back to shitting on the Early Middle Ages. So what was the point of the interview then? Speaking of interviews, during another one with the same expert, Cunk asks her which episode the Enlightenment will be in, which, she doesn't know? She's just here to info but dump about history. Why are you asking her? Next, Cunk talks about the Mayan temples, and then, what the hell is going on? Wait, is this an advertisement? Why is there an ad in a documentary? No, this isn't a normal ad break. This is baked into the documentary. Cunk even narrates and appears in it. I'd expect this from a YouTuber, but not a professionally produced documentary from the BBC. But since we're here, this video is sponsored by... Wait, we don't have a sponsor for this video? Well, damn, I guess sponsors don't care about the truth that they're fine putting their names on this and not us. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Next, Cunk talks about Islam. According to her, she has to follow a specific script to the letter or else face consequences. However, this script is blown away, which causes Cunk to improvise, which unfortunately was edited out of my version of the documentary, which, do you not have a digital version on hand? Why couldn't she just read it off her phone? Whatever. Next, she talks about Genghis, which for some reason she calls Genghis Kong, which is weird because earlier she brought up Scooby-Doo instead of The Mummy. If she's such a fan, she would know that Genghis Kong is actually the name of Dracula's henchman in Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf. So which is it, Cunk? Do you like Scooby-Doo, or are you a goddamn poser? Cunk then takes us to Castle from Bloons Tower Defense 5, where she explores a scenario back in medieval times, except she's just walking around an empty room while sound effects play. Did they forget the CGI for this scene? During the scene, Cunk says that the king was watching Merlin getting his head chopped off, which makes no sense. King Arthur and Merlin were BFFs. Why would he let that happen? Then they get a message from Robin Hood, who isn't real by the way. This causes the room to erupt into hysteria, including a space invader that shoots glass horses, even though space invaders don't do that? I mean, looking at this ancient software, I have no idea what they shoot, but it's definitely not glass horses. And with that, we have called out the lies of episode 2. Let us continue. This episode starts with the Renaissance, or as Cunk calls it, the Renaissance. I think it might be the accent, but I think it's funny. She talks about the famous statue David. She explains the amount of detail the sculpture has besides the you-know-what, however, complains about the lack of an anus, which is do you not know where the anus is on the body? Just spread David's cheeks and you'll see it. Trust me, they do it on tours all the time. She talks about a few other works from the Renaissance, and then compares the invention of perspective to the release of Crash Bandicoot. While Crash was a lot more commercially successful and popular at the time, Super Mario 64 brought a lot more innovation to gaming and is more popular today, so that would have been a more apt comparison. Next, we get to the discovery of the Americas. Cunk starts off by introducing one Christopher Colombo, but she got the picture wrong. This should do it. Next up is Galileo, where she tries to talk to the actor playing Galileo. He simply ignores her. Embarrassing. Oh yeah, also pump up the gym again. During an interview with an expert, Cunk just starts yapping about her ex, and she keeps going on, and when the expert agrees that he sucks, Cunk just calls out, bro, live on air. Who the fuck is Sean? I just want to hear history, damn it. Cunk then talks about the American Revolution and the French Revolution, which, according to these notes, I'm not supposed to comment on, which means this episode's section is shorter than the others. The episode ends with Cunk showing off an Alexa programmed with Beethoven's mind inside it, and it just starts freaking out because the hack frauds at Silicon Valley made it self-aware. Who gave it sentience? Why did Cunk feel the need to show it off? Why anything? Let's just get to the next episode. This episode starts with Cunk womansplaining air. Next, she talks about the gun. Now, of course, this European person doesn't understand our blessed America, even going so far as to say that Americans have the right to kill. Luckily, this expert sets her straight and explains to her our God and Founding Father given right to bear arms. Then, she keeps dunking on this land of the free and our beloved Thomas Edison, which even today everybody likes and has no legitimate problems with. Next, she talks about the invention of the airplanes. During an interview with an expert, she asks when toilets were put on planes. The expert is not sure, however, it is a well-known fact that the first airplanes were designed to have all their seats function as toilets. The human waste would go down a chute and drop from the sky. However, the feature was changed to the airline toilets we know today because one of the Wright brothers had the runs while flying over Cleveland. Next, she talks about the Titan 1C, which I think she mispronounced. I think she meant the animated film Titan AE, which is a very weird thing to bring up during the early 1900s, as Titan AE would not be released until 2000. And while it does have mild historical importance, being the last feature film animated by Fox Animation Studios and the last directed by Don Bluth, it pales in comparison to the previously mentioned airplanes and the next topic, Marie Curie, who discovered radioactivity, which Cunk compares to chakras. The expert then tries to tell her those aren't real, which she gets really defensive about, and then they start arguing. This is very unprofessional on Cunk's part. If you aren't going to listen to the experts, why have them on at all? Next, she asks why Marie Curie died from radiation, yet Bruce Banner got turned into the Hulk, claiming that radiation is sexist. Which, ignoring She-Hulk for a second, is Cunk unaware of the famous What If comic about Marie Curie becoming the first Hulk? Next, she talks about World War I, where she states that the fight was man versus machine, however the footage used is misleading. It implies that the tools that both sides used were the machines in question, even though man was actually fighting against Terminator-esque machines that looked very similar to us. Also, once again, pump up the jam. Next, Cunk talks about woman. Boring! Up next is the invention of film, my specialty. Unfortunately, Cunk calls early film shit, which is just wrong. I think. Full transparency, the oldest movie I've ever seen was released in 1966, but like, Citizen Kane released before that, it's objectively a great movie. Next, Cunk describes the damage of the atomic bomb if it was dropped on her ex-boyfriend's house. Poor Sean. Imagine your ex making a whole documentary about the history of the world where she makes constant jabs at you. I wouldn't do that to anyone, even for a facts about episode. During an interview with an expert, Cunk finds out that we still use nuclear weapons. This causes Cunk to cry. They both agree to change the subject to how much they like ABBA, but like, ABBA fucking sucks! Both the band and the Guilty Gear character. Ending the episode. The final episode's introduction ends with what I assume is an editing error as Cunk begins to walk off screen while saying her hair looks like shit. I think the editor was supposed to cut to the intro before that. Did no one proof watch this series? Cunk starts by talking about the formation of the Soviet Union, however she confuses it with the Soviet onion, which, for the uninformed, you know those spirally tops on the top of Russian architecture? Those aren't part of the building, but in fact really big onions. Cunk then transitions into talking about the Cold War and talks about her ex once again, claiming this time that he had a few missed calls from Claudia Tits, which she thinks isn't a real name, even though Claudia is a real name. That's the name of one of the cashiers down at my local grocery store. But of course a European wouldn't understand American names. Cunk then asks an expert if the Russians would play as Zangief in Street Fighter 2 if America picked Ken, even though Guile is right there. The expert says he cannot give a definitive answer, however I can. The Russians would actually input the secret cheat code to play as Akuma, and totally kick America's ass unless they also chose Akuma. Thus is the nature of the space race. Arms race. Space race is up next. Cunk accidentally confuses Sputnik for Spunk, which, for the non-European, Spunk is a slang for jizz, which is a slang for cum, which is a slang for semen, which is a slang for— wait, no, that last one was the scientific name. When Cunk finds out that Laika died during her voyage into space, she freaks out and claims that every film shot in space has a dead dog. Even going so far as to say Star Wars has dead dogs, even though Star Wars takes place in a galaxy far, far away. Which means there isn't a dead dog in Star Wars, and with the space films that are more local, if there was a dead dog, people would have pointed it out already. Unless you're talking about off-screen, but in that case, every Earth film would also have a dead dog in it. But why not stop at Laika? There are other dead dogs closer to us than Laika. They're also in every movie. Wait, holy shit. Every dead dog is in every movie! Off-screen, of course. While talking to an expert about Elvis Presley, she says things so ridiculous that the interviewer starts laughing, and Cunk is so confused why she's laughing her ass off. Then she says that John F. Kennedy's middle name is Effing, which isn't true. His middle name is actually Fitz... how do I pronounce that? Next, Cunk discusses the overrated hippie music of the Beatles, Rolling Stones, and the Kinks, which is absolute garbage. Unlike the superior Pump Up the Jam? By the way, every time after the first episode Pump Up the Jam plays, there are some facts put on screen about the song, and I have confirmed that every single one is true. So at least there's that. And then she claims that not only was the moon landing faked, but the moon isn't real. Is this a joke? Obviously not, but I hope I don't have to explain why this is false. The proof is literally outside your window, and if it isn't, wait a few more hours and it'll be there, trust. Which, to be honest, if I haven't proved this show's lies to you at this point, I don't know what else to do, because I don't think Cunk can top claiming the moon isn't real. So, let's wrap this up. I think there's only one question left to solve. Why is Cunk on Earth the way it is? Unfortunately, the series was made for streaming, so there's no DVD with a behind-the-scenes featurette, so unfortunately we don't have a definitive answer. But we can guess, and here's what I think. Our host, Philomena Cunk, doesn't seem to be the brightest bulb. She talks in a way that wouldn't normally be seen in a documentary. She's very casual, makes constant pop culture references, and nonchalantly talks about politics. I think it's also safe to say this documentary wasn't made on the largest budget. So here's what I think. This series was made because of sloponomics. You know what this is? I know you're not loyal to Facts About. I know you've been sleeping around with other video essayists. With Netflix literally admitting that their content is designed to be watched while also scrolling on TikTok, and now the BBC, one of the most revered TV networks on the planet, is joining in, this show was created for people to watch while watching something else, and that's why no one else is talking about it. George and I were the only people to actually watch it. Because I am totally above slop, which by extension makes you, my fellow Facts About truthers, above slop as well, but I think before we end this video, we should get another perspective. Luckily, I happen to be married to the only other person who actually watched this series, so I'm going to let him give us his thoughts on why Cunk on Earth is the way it is. Introducing George Facts.
The reason why Cunk on Earth is wrong about the things it discusses is because it was made by a woman. You see...
Thank you for watching Facts About Truthers. If you like the video, like the...
Hey, just so you know, I'm gonna have to edit most of George's part out.
Why?
Well, because he said a lot of very offensive things about women, the Irish, and somehow Sonic fans, most of which are straight up wrong.
Like what?
Like the claim that all three groups are responsible for the 2007 Transformer films? Which is the only thing he said that I feel comfortable saying out loud.
I mean, it's not that big of a deal. If he's so wrong, the viewers will know. Let them come to their own conclusions.
I mean, look, I don't even know why I'm bothering to argue with you about this. It's an order from corporate. Even if I wanted to keep it, it's out of my hands.
Fine, whatever, just get out. Subscribe or whatever, I don't care.